KISS Behavioral Cultural Intelligence, Chapter 14 by Leticia Rodriguez. Americans are conformist. According to Livermore, empirical studies suggest that more than half of American adults can be described as conformist. Why is this? Well, if we look traditionally here in America, we look and divide ourselves into the haves and the have-nots. Why is this? It's because we make choices about where to live, how to dress, what car to drive, and where to vacation based on the norms of the dominant groups to which we belong. Conformists are characterized by stereotypical thinking, cliches, all-or-nothing statements, and concrete thinking. Conformists want what their group values. We feel trust and warmth with people like ourselves and feel uncomfortable and suspicious of people who are different. Conformists living alternative lifestyles are uncomfortable with straight people, and conformists living as straight people are uncomfortable around people living alternative lifestyles. So, what I found very interesting is, just like Livermore said, Baptists seek out Baptists, white-collar professionals seek out white-collar professionals, emergent church leaders hang out with the emergent church leaders, Mexican Americans look for Mexican Americans, 30-somethings look for 30-somethings, and this is what it means to be a conformist. So just think about it for a moment. Have you guys ever gone to a football game or a social church gathering, whether your PTO meetings for your children's school or just somewhere where you didn't know anyone? We're always searching for someone that looks like us just to make us comfortable, or we're looking for that friendly face or that familiar face just so that we can feel comfortable and be like, okay, everything's going to be okay. So once we find someone that we can relate to, we feel more comfortable around our own. The identity of the conformist is scarcely derived from an internal sense of self, but mostly from the various groups to which the individual belongs. How do they perceive me? How do I present myself as successful in this context? For the conformist, knowing how to behave when encountering the other is often disorienting and frustrating. And even service to the other is usually used to form one's self-identity rather than as a true act of selfless love for the other. Most adults around us are preoccupied with appearance, reputation, social acceptance, and belonging. Why is this? Insecurities and people. We all struggle with these insecurities. To desire love, acceptance, and belonging is not a bad thing. It's part of what it means to be human. We long for community and a secure sense of identity and belonging. But remaining in a state of conformity throughout adulthood runs against the Christian call to surrender control and power and to love God through our selfless service to the other. The way we serve the other is reflected in our behavior, which is nothing more than a symptom of what lies deep within. According to Jones, your problem is not with people, it is with evil. I find this very, very interesting because once we are really harsh on ourselves because of others criticizing us, or maybe we are, criticizing ourselves. We are our worst critics. And when we have low self-esteem, we sometimes seem to project that onto others. And I like how Livermore states, at the end of the day, our love for the other is judged based on how we behave. So it seems that when we get these insecurities out of the way and we are more secure in ourselves, we seem to project positive behaviors, and we initiate positive relationships. So that is what we're searching for. Behavioral cultural intelligence. Behavioral cultural intelligence is the extent to which we appropriately change our verbal and nonverbal actions when we interact cross-culturally. The real challenge here is knowing when it's appropriate to flex our behavior from how we would act in our own cultural context and when it isn't. When will not flexing our behavior become a roadblock, and when will doing so appear authentic? Those are the questions we want to explore as we look at this final dimension of cultural intelligence, behavioral cultural intelligence. The goal is to be ourselves while figuring out which behaviors need to change in order to lovingly express who we are and who Jesus is. Challenges in ministry. Robert D. Dale questions in his book, Leadership for a Changing Church. Is it possible for leaders to lead today? His answer, learn the shape of the river. That's what effective leaders do. Internalize the shape of the river. In other words, modern church leaders need navigational guidelines to help them scout out and chart the water levels and obstacles of the leadership river. I think this is beautifully said, and it matches up clearly with Livermore, what he states, and learning the cultural norms of different groups of people helps us more effectively communicate love in ways they will understand. It's an essential competency for me as a ministry leader in order to effectively and authentically become a living picture of Christ to the other. As he also states, we can't possibly learn the love languages of all the people we encounter in ministry. But learning the cultural norms of different groups of people helps us more effectively communicate love in ways they will understand. This is a positive goal. Our cultural intelligence is ultimately judged on behalf of our behavior. A couple of ways we can measure ourselves is according to these next bullet points that Livermore has stated. Do I use pause and silence differently to suit different cross-cultural situations? Do I alter my verbal behavior according to the culture that I am in? Do I display different behaviors based on specifics of the local culture? Do I change the manner in which I greet others when in different cultures? Do I change the amount of warmth and enthusiasm I express when talking to others to suit the cultural setting? The actions stated previously are measured when we test behavioral cultural intelligence. The most effective way to manipulate our behavior is through the other three factors of cultural intelligence, which are knowledge cultural intelligence, understanding cross-cultural issues and differences. Another is interpretive cultural intelligence, which is the degree to which we're mindful and aware when we interact cross-culturally. Third, perseverance, cultural intelligence, our level of interest, drive, and motivation to adapt cross-culturally. And then, of course, behavioral cultural intelligence, which is the extent to which we appropriately change our verbal and nonverbal actions when we interact cross-culturally. Behavioral cultural intelligence is primarily the outcome of our understanding, thinking, and motivation. So there's less information about behavioral cultural in the chapters that were devoted to the other three factors. So in the sense of Livermore, he states that the whole book is about behavioral culture intelligence in a sense, but moving from the desire to love to actually expressing love in respectful, meaningful ways is manifested in our behavior. So this is important. Understanding and going deep and persevering translate into behavioral cultural intelligence. What works for the other may not work for you, and what works for you may not work for the other. Please take the time to watch this funny video that I have included, and then we will have some feedback here shortly. Okay, so you must have finished the video by now. If you laugh like I did, I thought this was pretty funny, but it could happen to any of us. We all come from different walks of life. We come from different backgrounds. We have different cultures. We are all from all over the world. So this really made sense to me. I hope you enjoyed it. But we must really take a stand back and think, this is where we have to learn where the other, we have to meet them and understand them just like they would need to meet us in the middle so that we can compromise and not have so many misunderstandings or misinterpretations, because we could get our crosshairs crossed very quickly if we don't work together in understanding the other. So we should learn when to flex and not flex. Flexing is when learning if and when it is appropriate to adapt our behavior to the culture of the other is a complex question. As Craig Storty describes, two types of adjustments that invariably must occur as we interact cross-culturally. They are referred to as type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is we have to adjust to behaviors of the other that annoy or confuse us. And type 2, we have to adjust our own behavior so that it doesn't needlessly annoy or confuse the other. We can simply see this in the example of Habib as an immigration official in the Middle Eastern country. But with this scenario, if it would have happened here in America, we would have simply addressed this as corruption. But corruption would probably offend the person, Habib, if we were to tell him this, because in his country, obviously, it works to his benefit, especially that he does not make much in his country. Not flexing. This is another route we can take. This is where one of the subtle but important differences between the conceptualization of cultural intelligence and that of other theories of cross-cultural sensitivity is the acknowledgement that in some situations the best option is not to adapt at all. This is very interesting because adjusting to the behavior of the other culture is a double-edged sword. As Livermore states, this was a great example and scenario if you think about it. Youth are usually grateful for youth leaders who seek to understand and respect their reasons behind dressing the way they do and listening to the kind of music they like. But that doesn't mean they want their leaders to start dressing like them and marrying their iPod playlist. That is very important, and that is really great knowledge to retain because we have to meet in the middle or back up sometimes, and this is what not flexing seems to be. So in conclusion, what can we gather with all the information that we just read from chapter 14? Is simply this. The biggest challenges lie in miscommunication, misunderstanding, personality conflicts, poor leadership, and bad teamwork. Cultural intelligence is demonstrated through our social interactions and cross-cultural relationships. We can all work together and work with respect, love, and acknowledge the other, and using knowledge and interpretive cultural intelligence.